Good morning, my beautiful woman, and welcome to yet another episode of Lingerie and Lattes. My name is Olivia Drumaga, and I founded Vulcan Ability in order for us to really have methods to integrate our sensual traumas into something for connection within our partnerships. So, as we move forward, today's subject is all regarding women and how we have these cycles. We exist in a very cyclical form. The way we discuss certain subjects, or the way that everything in our minds is very much interconnected, is different, starkly different than men. Men think in a more linear fashion. Everything is a point A to a point B, so they are moving along a chronological kind of timeline. As a woman, we don't operate in that manner, and that's why we've had so many we've been butting heads against the world for the most part, because it's structured in a very masculine sense. If we think about how long our days are, how long our times of work are, and etc. Like sitting for X amount of hours, 8 hours of focus on one particular thing, then moving on to the next thing, doing that for X amount of weeks, and then only having 1 week off. There's not really much change in that rigid structure. So women have found it to be a little bit more difficult to mesh into this style. But I want to bring this concept a little bit more closely in intimate relationships. And when we start to notice that women are very cyclical in nature, we start to notice what patterns we're also bringing into the relationship when it comes to communicating with our partners, and potentially always focusing on that which can be improved, and not really put like pausing to associate any appreciation and expressing that to our partners can be a little bit more challenging for most women because of that cyclical nature. So let me explain this a little further. If we always think about coming from one perspective and then going all onto all these journeys and then coming back around to that same point, that's cyclical. If we consider how many times we have come about our relationships and communications in that sort of a nature, thinking that we've resolved an issue with a partner, then going about the day, going about the weeks and the months, and then coming back to that same issue and bringing it up to our partner again, that could be referred to as a cyclical nature in our relationships, in what we actually bring into the relationship. So when we observe how we behave in that manner, it might be a lot easier to see why there's discontent inside of your emotional connection to how the relationship resides within you. Because if the only thing you're ever doing is connecting back to that same issue because it has not been resolved, you're not interacting with the masculine enough. You're not integrating the masculine power enough, because that's what moves relationships in any direction. That pull and push of masculinity is actually what is the driving force for relationships to flourish. So if we're only connecting with our own perspective and never allowing our partner's energy or their nature to come through and impact our relationships, then we will never get anywhere. Just as men will never be able to kind of settle down into a relationship if they're only focused on their masculine energy of going, going, and going, because there's no settling. There's no moments of pause, no coming back to that which was. So if we're considering observing again how we behave in relationships and maybe picking up on certain patterns, I notice that around every month, closer to maybe for the last week and a half, near my cycle, I start to pick fights around my relationship, and usually they are untriggered. Usually I will start to feel discontentment around anything, honestly, and then start to narrow my vision on relationships. And this beautifully relates to last week's subject from Lingerie and Latte's episode before this, because what we talked about was how women always tend to focus on their partners and their relationships in in emotional sensations, whereas men don't. They focus on the external because that's, again, a part of their nature. So when we just take a step back and we start to notice, like, well, maybe, and I probably am in this pattern of maybe always bringing up that my partner can take out the trash more often, because I keep having to remind him every week and I just want him to do it. Noticing that, or noticing whatever the pattern that is, which causes a little bit of friction. And then you would want to kind of take a moment to step back and observe, like, how would it feel to always have a partner that you love? Anytime they approach you, it's always from the same lens of, like, oh, can you do this? Why haven't you done this? And if that's the only oncoming interaction, it can get pretty exhausting. And you can notice that very quickly when we take a step out of ourselves and into our partner's shoes and be the receiver of your actions. So I really think this is an important exercise, a mental exercise we could do for ourselves, and just starting to notice, and this goes both ways, not as any of this should, for your partner to do the same, to kind of stop and consider, how is his behavior being received by you? So having us begin is always the best way to get our partner to do a better job in the relationship. Like, leading by example is the way that we are always going to impact another person versus telling or even informing. None of that works more than just showing and leading by example, because then you can almost tell, like, wow, this is possible. All right, my ladies, that was it for today's episode. Recognizing the patterns that we're bringing into the relationships and addressing immediately, whether we're coming always from, for me personally, it was always coming from a negative perspective where my partner didn't even feel like he made me happy, because I just always expressed things that I felt could be done better. And that's because it is a part of my nature to always be focused on improvement. And maybe internally I could celebrate, like, whoa, we've moved in our relationship. But I didn't express that, in my opinion, enough to where he felt it. And that's important feedback for us as women, especially because a lot of the times we want to just put all of the blame onto our partners, as most people who are wounded want to do. But a lot of the times they're our mirrors, and so something within us is representing something else, as a reaction. Every action has a reaction, so it's kind of coming from that mindset. Our partners are our identical mirrors, and something that we don't like in them could be a response to something that is within us. So on that note, I want you all to have an absolutely magical weekend. Happy 4th if you're in America. A day to just kind of take it slower. And also, if you haven't noticed, there are a little more episodes being dropped in the Vulcan Ability Library. So please get in there and watch all of the master classes. The most recent ones are the Dr. Money and David Reamer case, which is all about how the transgender movement is based upon a science experiment. And Dr. Money is the doctor who conducted this experiment, one of the few who began it. All right. Thank you so much.